Good morning. Welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. I would like to share our creed. We haven't said it in a while. Seattle Atheist Church was founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to all conscious beings, and we believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. If that sounds good to you, you are probably in the right place. So the way we do it here is the members themselves give the talk, and then afterwards we'll form a discussion circle. And it's good to see that we are getting so big that at the planning meeting next week, we might want to think about what we're going to do if we keep growing in size. Because the discussion circle is a very important part of what we do here. Okay, next week is the planning meeting. Everyone is welcome. And think if there's a talk or topic that you would like to make happen, join us for that. Also, on Friday the 8th, we are going to be seeing the movie Hidden Figures. Sign up for that online so that you can get all the details of where to meet. And last but not least, you can contribute in many different ways. Invite a friend, show up, and participate. And if you would like to help financially, we have a donation jar somewhere in the room. It's on that table. And also, Jack can swipe a credit card if you'd like to swipe a credit card. I think that's it. So come on up, Mickey.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here to deliver the third of this 3-lecture series called Living in the Meat Suit, about the trials and tribulations and perils and practices of trying to run our software on a chunk of hamburger in our heads. It's not necessarily the best hardware you can think of for rationality or repeatability. This third talk is called Dangerous Minds. Last week, I talked about some reasons why you might want to choose to believe things for which you had insufficient evidence, and argued against believing things that contradict the evidence you have available. This week, I'm going to talk about some of the more problematic tendencies of the evolutionary heritage of mind that we've all been gifted with. Hence the topic, Dangerous Minds, or title, Dangerous Minds. I had a couple of good examples all lined up, and then literally 2 minutes before we started, one of the members walked up and handed me a CD of religious music, Christian music, saying, "Someone gave this to me and I don't know what to do with it," and handed me a perfect prop for this talk. Because this CD is titled, "Won't You Try It, Please?" All right? Well, won't you try it, please? There is a fallacy out there. And that fallacy is that you need to give everything a fair shake. And just trying it can't hurt. This has come up a lot in our public discourse lately, with people saying that really we need to hear the Nazis out. And why are we just shouting them down as soon as they start talking? It's because they're murdering racists. That's why. It's not actually safe to give everyone a fair listen. We gave them 5 years to tell us what they meant between 1940 and 1945, and they showed us very clearly. It's not actually a good idea much less a moral obligation to try it, please. You only have so much brain space. You only have so much time. There are plenty of people out there who will spend all the time you'll give them telling you why the Earth is flat and explaining eclipses in terms of the sun and the moon spinning in a little circle like this as they spin around a big circle. They reinvented epicycles. I mean, seriously. I was reading a Flat Earther website, and they reinvented epicycles to explain eclipses. It's amazing. This stuff was literally disproven and replaced with a better theory 400 or 500 years ago. And they're coming up with like, look how clever this idea is. You don't actually need to spend your time or your energy learning about or even debunking every idea that someone tries to present to you. Won't you try it, please? Nope. Really not. But that's a fallacy. That fallacy is, let's be fair. Let's give it a fair shake. Surely it can't hurt to just listen. Surely it can't hurt to. It actually can. Now, why do we have that fallacy? This is a rhetorical question, by the way. You don't need to answer it. Why do we have that fallacy? It's because, in general, it's adaptive for a society to hear each other out. In general, it's a good idea if someone is having a conversation with you to let them finish their sentence or even their paragraph before you jump up and down and go, oh my God, how could you be so wrong? All right? That's actually a socially adaptive, relationally adaptive thing. But it's not a logical rule. And it's one of the ways that people manipulate human beings with the evolutionary heritage of adaptive behaviors that we've all collected over the last N million years. Okay? I'm going to put a plug in for one of my favorite books in the whole world now. It's a book by Robert Cialdini, Cialdini, called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. Now, I expect all of you to go out, buy that book today with your own money, next day delivery, and spend all day tomorrow reading it. You all have to have done that by tomorrow night. Well, you can't, well, at least put an order in, okay? Don't actually do that. I was manipulating you. That, by the way, was a technique called the door in the face technique. How would you like to give $1,000 to the Seattle Atheist Church? I can't give $1,000. Oh, well, how about 10? Well, sure. You ask something unreasonable, they say no, they feel guilty about saying no, so they say yes to the smaller request. Works. How about this one? Could you guys give something to the Seattle Atheist Church? Even a penny will make a huge difference. Who here is such a cheapskate that they wouldn't give even a penny? Who here is such a cheapskate that they'd give 1 penny? Turns out, thank you, Jade. Turns out that in fact, most people won't say, no, I won't give even a penny. And they also won't give just a penny, they'll give $5. It's called the foot in the door technique. You ask people for something so small they feel bad about saying no, and then, because people don't actually give pennies to charity, they give you $1 or $2 or $5. Cialdini really wanted to understand how people manipulate each other, how they influence each other. So he started doing a whole bunch of research in a lab about no. He went out and talked to used car salesmen. He went out and talked to con artists. He said, who is successfully influencing people? And he went and asked them, how do you do it? Then he took those things they told him and proved them rigorously in controlled studies. It's an entire book of ways that your brain, simply by virtue of being human, is hackable. And unfortunately, those are hardware vulnerabilities. How many people here are software engineers of some flavor? Or software engineer adjacent? Okay, enough. We have hardware vulnerabilities to these bugs. There is no software patch that makes us immune to them. And honestly, we're pretty poor at patching our software too. About the best we can do is be aware that we are hackable, so we notice after the fact when someone hacked us and go, wow, I don't think I'm going to donate to that organization anymore. They sent me a 10-cent sheet of stickers, so I'd feel socially obligated to send them $20. I actually have a policy on that, by the way. That's another way to manipulate people. Would you like a flower? If you say no, you're being rude. If you say yes, then when they say, would you donate some money? You have an obligation. They gave you a flower, you need to give something back. So I have a policy for that. If a charity sends me pre-printed address labels or a page of stickers that I didn't ask for, I will not donate to them, not even 1 penny. Because they're manipulating me, and they're manipulating me in a very wasteful way. It costs money to print those sheets of address labels and stickers. They go to a lot of people, most of whom still don't send anything in. And I don't like being manipulated. So, to avoid that particular manipulation, if you give me an unsolicited gift and then ask me for a donation, I will say no. No matter how much I approve of your cause, no matter how much I like what you're doing, don't try to manipulate me. You can think of it as an allergy. I have an allergy to manipulation. Yes?
I'd like to tell a story about one time that I was manipulated in an actually simple way. So one day...
why don't you save that for the discussion circle?
Okay.
Brief questions I don't mind at all. It helps us keep the communication going. Long questions, let's save them for the discussion circle so we can have group participation.
It's just reminded of me by the end.
Oh, hold on to it, because I want to hear about it later. The most this talk can do is give you an idea of the kinds of dangerous thinking that you are prone to. Because there are more hackable flaws in the human psyche than I could list if I had all day to stand here and talk. Literally, I'm not speaking hyperbolically. There are so many bugs in our software. And people like politicians and con artists and religious leaders have been discovering and developing and weaponizing these mechanisms to use against our minds. What sells, in advertising terms, what sells?
Sex.
Sex sells. Sex sells is actually it's a trope in the advertising industry. Sex sells. It's a quotable phrase. People say it because it's true. If you show someone a car, and you show someone a car with a scantily clad attractive person draped over the hood, they're more likely to spend real money on a real car, even though, you know what? It doesn't come with an attractive person scantily clad draped over the hood. What the heck, people? One of the ways that we as human beings are easily manipulated is by appealing to our primal drives. How many of you have heard soft drink commercials where you hear clink, clink, clink noises? They're appealing to your primal drive of thirst, right? They're making the sounds of liquid running into a glass, and you're gonna feel thirsty. And you're gonna associate that thirst with the branding, right? Nothing you can do about it. You're always going to be more interested in a drink if someone is making cold liquid running noises than if they're showing you the drink. But it's good to be aware of why a Diet Coke suddenly sounds so good.
Dang it, now I'm thirsty.
Yes, all of you who are now thirsty, I apologize. Sometimes these innate biases are actively dangerous to our survival. How many people here, show of hands, have driven an SUV? Or a van? A big vehicle of some sort, pickup truck? About half. How many of you felt safe driving that vehicle? Pretty much all of you. How many of you are aware that you were radically less safe while driving that vehicle? right? If you look at vehicles of the form factor of pickup truck or van or SUV, the things where you're way up high, the risk of a fatal rollover accident is exceptionally higher. It's like 3 times, I don't remember, it's like 3 times as high. They are crazy dangerous. You would be infinitely safer if you were down low. But if you ask people, they'll say things like, no, because I can see the traffic up ahead, so I know what's coming, so I can react faster and I'm safer. People will rationalize why they feel safer. The actual reason people feel safer is because when a monkey is up in a tree, that monkey is safer than when a monkey is on the ground. Vertical elevation makes hominids feel safer. Actually, driving an SUV or a pickup truck or a van is incredibly dangerous. And for the most part, there's no benefit. Your SUV would carry just as many people if it were dropped down like a minivan as if it's way up high on these big wheels, right? Your van would work just as well for 99% of us, 99% of the time. It would work just as well if it had a 6-inch ground clearance. So why do I have to climb up? I'm 6'8", okay? I have to climb up into my van. Big step up into my van. Why? Because it sells. Because safety sells, and being up higher makes you feel safer. But it makes you less safe. That's actually an actionable thing. If you drive an SUV or a pickup truck or a big van, knowing that you are having a false sense of safety will help you not be overconfident. Drive a little more cautiously. Maybe buy a lower profile vehicle next time. Yes?
You have a gigantic van.
I have a gigantic van, that's true. I also have a household of 7 people. You ever try fitting 7 people in a minivan with any pets or luggage or anything? Sorry, 8 people. 8 people. Thanks, Eva. 8 people don't fit in anything other than a van. But if someone came out with a low van with the stability of a car, well, I'd like to think I'd jump on it and buy one. But probably I just wouldn't quite like it as well. I'm not sure why. All right? Knowing about these unconscious, hardwired, built-in biases is really helpful. Because at least it gives you the opportunity to outthink yourself. To use some of the long-term planning and logical abstract symbol manipulation skills provided by that nice thin cerebral cortex that's wrapped around this whole big blob of brain to figure out, well, yes, I like this SUV better, and it looks cool, and I feel safe in it, but really, I'm not ever going to drive it off-road. Really, a minivan would be safer and more fuel efficient and cheaper. I'm going to buy the minivan. All right? There unfortunately isn't a convenient... Alex, sit down, please. Thank you. Sorry. Really, there isn't a convenient list of all of the cognitive biases humans are subject to, which is part of why we have Seattle Atheist Church. One of the things we talk about here a lot is ways that your brain is miswired for your purposes and steps you can take to work around that. A couple weeks back we talked about the fundamental attribution error. Who here remembers the fundamental attribution error? Good, I'll go over it again, because you know what? Spiral curriculum. Have we talked about the spiral curriculum? Spiral curriculum, this is a digression on a digression. Spiral curriculum is the idea that you teach something, and then you come back around to it a month or 6 months or a year later, and you teach the same thing but in greater depth. And you come back around a year later, you teach the same thing but in greater depth. Rather than trying to teach the entire thing once, or teaching the same thing every time, you're teaching the same things in greater depth each time. Repetition helps, and once you have a foundation in a concept, it's easier to acquire more nuanced information about it. The fundamental attribution error is why when I say, God damn it, because I stubbed my toe, it's because it hurt a lot and I was surprised, and anyone would. But when you say, God damn it, when you stub your toe, it's because you're a foul-mouthed person who just doesn't have any self-control. The fundamental attribution error is that we make up good reasons for why we do things and judgmental reasons for why other people do things. We know that we cut into that big line of traffic because we're going to be late for work, and if we were late for work one more time, we might get fired, and besides, we have a family to support. But that other guy, he just cut in because he is an arrogant bastard. So selfish, thoughtless, and inconsiderate. I got a trick for you. This really helps with road rage. I'm not the only person who uses this trick. When someone cuts me off, when someone drives dangerously, when someone honks their horn and then bulls their way into a line, all of which I have done in the past because there were really important good reasons to do it, swear to God, because I'm a nice guy, right? When someone does one of those things, I say out loud, wow, I really hope he gets to the hospital on time. Wow, I hope his partner is okay. Wow, I really hope he makes it to that job interview on time. I make up the kind of reason that I've driven that way in the past. And I say it out loud about that person. Now, they can't hear it. It doesn't have any effect on the universe. I have no reason to believe they actually are on the way to the hospital. This, by the way, is an example of a non-evidentiary belief, a stance I'm taking, right? I don't believe they're on the way. If I believe they were on the way to the hospital, I'd be like calling 911 saying, this person needs a police escort, they're on the way to the hospital, and they're driving too fast because they have to get there before the person dies of a heart attack or whatever, right? I don't believe that they are having a heart attack, or that they're on the way to the hospital, or that they're late for a job interview. But I take the stance that they are driving that way for one of those reasons as a conscious counterbalance to the fundamental attribution error. Because it does me no harm, it does no one any harm for me to have this non-evidentiary belief about their reasons. And I was going to make up a statistically likely to be false reason otherwise. What reason is that? That they're a jerk. If I don't consciously make up a story that is positive and induces compassion, the fundamental attribution error will cause me to make up a probabilistically false belief that they're a jerk. They're probably not actually a jerk. How many people here have cut in a long line of cars, like pretended they didn't know which lane to get into, and cut in a long line of cars because they had some really important reason to get somewhere on time in the past year? Raise your hand if you have done that in the past year. I'm dead serious. I don't believe you. People do that. Good, nice, friendly people do that. But if you don't take steps to consciously counteract the fundamental attribution error, you will find yourself believing they are a jerk, and you'll honk your horn. Why did you honk your horn? Because they were a jerk. That's your story. But remember, they are running on the head hamburger too. According to their experience, why did you honk your horn? Because you're a jerk. They're just trying to get to the damn hospital. And here you are leaning on the horn and flipping them off. What the heck? What kind of jerk does that? So they honk their horn too, and they slam their brakes on a bit to show you. Is this sounding familiar to anyone? This is an interaction I've had on both sides. I've been the person cutting in line and the person honking and the person slamming their brakes on many, many times. But I've also been the person who they cut in line and I wave and gesture like this and give them a thumbs up. I can literally see their shoulders relax when I do that. I can look through their window at the person who just cut me off and watch them do that. Next time someone is rude to you in traffic, try this experiment, because we're rationalists, we like experiments, right? Next time someone is a jerk in traffic, try this experiment. Especially when you know you're right. You know you stopped at the stop sign first. You know you were the next person in the zipper merge. The next time you know you are right in traffic, play act that you're going to let them go first because you like them and you want them to be happy. Do that. No problem. Go ahead. Go on. It's all good. Go ahead. And watch their physical reaction. Because what you're doing is you're helping them overcome the fundamental attribution error without even telling them that that's what you're doing. Without a word exchanged, you are helping them overcome the natural, hardwired human inclination to think that you're a jerk because you won't let them in. Okay? Actually, I wish I'd had that example last week, because it's a great example of a place where a non-evidentiary belief is really effective. Oh, and there's one other big advantage of that. When I say, wow, I hope they make it to the hospital on time, I relax. I smile, I wave, I let the next two people in too, because it's so hard to merge onto this street from that side street. Their day is improved, my day is improved, and oh look, I didn't get road ragey and try to play chicken with someone's gosh darn fender. Right? How many people have done the fender chicken? If you've ever played fender chicken, where they're merging in and you're merging in and there's only room for one car and you're not going to be the one to back down and they're not going to be the one to back down and your fender's doing this as you get closer and closer. Who here has played fender chicken? We got about a third of the men in the audience who drive. I said men for a reason. Do you know who's statistically more likely in our culture to get into that kind of road rage accident? It's not women. I don't actually care, by the way, whether it's genetics or environment or culture or prenatal hormones or postnatal hormones. I don't care. I actually don't. I do care that it's good to know, it's important for me to know that as a assigned male at birth person who was raised in my culture as a boy and then a man, I'm much more likely to get in a stupid accident because of road rage than a woman is. It lets me know what to be extra careful of. Which brings us to another interesting misthought that we are prone to, which is we always want there to be one explanation and we want to be right about it. We want it to either be totally sexist for me to say that, people are people and how can I say that, or we want it to be, why are men so aggressive and angry all the time? Women don't have these problems, it's a man thing. Reality is more nuanced than that, and human brains don't like nuance. We're not really happy with it. Are there statistical differences between men and women? Yes, there are. Do they vary by culture? Almost all of them, yes. Are some of them still genetic or hormonal? Yeah, they are. Do they make a practical difference in 99% of the things we do in daily life? No, they don't. There is virtually no trait you can find where every single man has more of it than every single woman. You can draw the distribution, the bell curve. Here's men, here's women. They're not exactly the same. They're really flippin' close. There's a lot more overlap than there is difference. Which is, by the way, the core flaw with a lot of gender essentialism, is not just that it ignores the effect of culture, it ignores how small the effects are relative to variation within a gender. Because we want a single theory, and we want it to be right, and we want it to explain everything. We oversimplify. That's another bias. For almost everything, there is more nuance than your brain is comfortable with. Something to be aware of. Is there a fix for it? No, it's a hardware bug. But it's something you can compensate for. You can ask yourself, okay, why do people believe this other thing? Let's argue devil's advocate for a while. Anytime I'm trying to argue something, I will stop and argue devil's advocate and see if I can convince myself or anyone else of the other side. Because if I can, I probably don't have a very strong position. That's one way of counterbalancing the fact that I want there to be one explanation and I want it to be right, and by the way, I want it to be mine. Consciously argue devil's advocate. I'm going to check my notes on one thing. I never have notes, but thanks to Eva, I have notes today. Oh, here's a good one. Attractive people are good. It's a very strong bias. Humans are inclined to make excuses for the bad behavior of attractive people, to harshly judge the behavior of unattractive people, to trust and believe attractive people. When the very handsome person says, I didn't punch him, and the dorky person with glasses and acne says, he punched me, the principal's going to believe the attractive person. Because humans have a cognitive bias toward trusting and believing attractive people and thinking they're good people. There's a hidden trap there. What's attractive is defined by your culture. There are strong cultural elements that say that lighter skin is more attractive than darker skin in our culture. It's just messed up racism. It's just unhealthy, sick bias, but it's there in our culture. And not only does it have effects on self-esteem and self-worth, it has effects in who gets believed more in court. Because we trust attractive people more. And we've defined this characteristic as making someone less attractive. Stop and think about that. Fat people are less attractive. I'm fat, by the way. According to our culture, fat people are less attractive. According to our culture, it's even worse if you're female. But they're both true of our culture's beliefs. So people find me less trustworthy than they would if I weighed 100 pounds less. They think I'm less likable. They think I am a less nice person because I have 100 pounds extra of abdominal fat. Think about that. That wasn't a sign of the door, that was the wind slamming the door. Sorry. People will trust me less and think I am a worse person because we define fat as unattractive. Go back 400 years, fat was considered extremely attractive. Rubens didn't paint people who are fat by our current standards because he had an obsession with fat people or a fetish for fat people. He painted them because they were hot. Because by the standards of a culture where food is scarce, obesity is attractive. By the standards of a culture where high-quality nutrition is scarce and lots of corn syrup and wheat products are cheap, suddenly being thin is attractive. Right? Because our standards of beauty are socially constructed. But it still happens. We still have those standards of beauty. They're not something you have to consciously... Oh, this is another interesting fallacy. Knowing something doesn't control whether or not you believe it. Knowing the truth or falsehood of something doesn't control whether or not you believe it. When television was introduced to the Fiji Islands, the rates of eating disorders among women in the Fiji Islands went from approximately 1% to approximately 20% in a handful of years. Now, no one was saying on television shows, you should start throwing up your meals or stop eating because fat is bad and thin is good. There were no TV shows preaching how awful people were for looking the way they did, overtly. But the message was there. And even though the Fiji Islanders wouldn't have said, if you asked them, oh yeah, fat is so bad that I should starve myself to death rather than be fat, observationally, the rates of eating disorders went from almost none to 1 in 5 in a handful of years, immediately after television was introduced. Our brains are affected by signals that we're not even consciously aware of. We have dangerous minds. We need to be careful and conscious and aware of the dangers in our minds, of the places where our hardware and our culturally inculcated software are buggy, have exploitable loopholes, have unpatched security vulnerabilities, do the wrong math like the Pentium. Remember the Pentium? Yeah? Those are the 386, the 486, and the 4.999999986. Old timer joke, sorry. We have hardware. We run our brains on hardware that is infinitely more buggy, not infinitely, it's stupendously, there we go, more buggy than any piece of computer hardware ever built. And we're trying to run rational evaluations of reality on these chunks of head hamburger. Knowing where the built-in biases are, knowing what the dangers are that you can't avoid, that are built into the structure of your head, again, whether it's physical structure or whether it's software structure, doesn't really matter. It can be useful to know what's hardwired and what's cultural, but it doesn't change things for your purposes, you as a human being. But knowing what those weaknesses are, what those vulnerabilities are, where you have unavoidable built-in irrationality, can help you choose and use compensatory strategies. If you're interested in knowing more about this, read Cialdini's book. Read up on, well, for one thing, read a bunch of liberal sources on unconscious racism and systemic racism. Because I get most of the people I'm looking at right now appear to me to be, by our culture standards, white. Most of you, statistically speaking, believe a bunch of nonsense. And you don't even know it. But it's worth educating yourself to find out what things you believe that just ain't so. Because you've got software bugs. You have software bugs that say things like, if there's a fight and there's a black man and a white man in that fight, the black man is more dangerous. Why do you believe that? You've been programmed to. Also, we have innate human vulnerabilities in our software that say that people like us get the benefit of the doubt. And how we define like us often breaks down along lines like race and gender and sexual orientation. These biases are not accidental. They're just wrong. It's not that they're morally wrong. They're logically wrong. They are failures of rationality. But they're not accidental. Not everyone has a phobia of spiders. But a lot more people have a phobia of spiders than a phobia of birds. Okay? Humans have a natural propensity to develop fears of spiders, snakes, high places, the dark, and people who don't look like them. That doesn't mean spiders are bad. Spiders are wonderful and they kill dangerous insects and etc. But it does mean that we should know as humans that we have a propensity to develop phobias of spiders. We should know as humans that we have a propensity to develop irrational negative beliefs about people who don't look like us. About people we have. How many of you in this room have spent more than 15 minutes talking to someone who wore a hijab? It's a lot more than I would have expected. Good on you guys. I haven't. I haven't had the opportunity. I also haven't sought out the opportunity. So I have some, I'm a good solid liberal. I have some good solid liberal beliefs about the kinds of people who wear hijabs. Do you see what I did there? Who can tell me what I did there?
The
Go.
kinds of people.
The kinds of people who wear hijabs. Yup. Apparently, I have a belief that there's a kind of person or a set of kinds of people who wear hijabs. I couldn't actually tell you what I think it is if you asked me. I haven't examined those beliefs, but apparently I have them. It shows up in my language. Well, one good solution to the human tendency, the built-in tendency, to build up unconscious biases and then act on them unconsciously is to actually get to know the people as people. All right? If I want to not be biased about people wearing hijabs, I need to spend time getting to know people who choose to wear hijabs. If I want to interview people at work who aren't white, and give them as fair an interview as I give people who are white, I need to spend time not at work in an interview context, socializing with people who aren't white, humanizing them. Because there's another bug in the human brain, and it's a really important one. We dehumanize people so we don't have to care about them. We have a natural tendency to dehumanize people so that we don't have to care about them, we don't have to spend our time feeling empathy for them, we don't have to fight for social justice for them, we don't have to stop and help them if they're broken down on the side of the road. This natural tendency to dehumanize, by the way, is what boot camp takes advantage of to turn sane people into killers. That's how strong that tendency is. That you can take people, and in only 6 weeks of cult programming, because if you actually look at the techniques cults use to program people, the techniques used in boot camp, they're the same techniques. In 6 weeks of programming, I can turn 1 in 4 people into a killer. Now, what do I say, 1 in 4? Among trained soldiers, 25% of guns are ever fired in combat. 3/4 of soldiers can't pull the trigger when there's another human being in the sights, even after 6 weeks of cult programming, even to save their own lives or the lives of people in their platoon. 3/4 of soldiers can't pull the trigger, but 1/4 can. And the way they can is that boot camp and military propaganda in general teach you to dehumanize. They hook into that unconscious built-in bias that says, I can dehumanize the other and then it's not a person and I don't have to empathize. And they use that built-in wiring in your head to turn 1 in 4 ordinary mentally healthy people into killers. I've talked before, like 1.5 years ago, about the Milgram shock experiments. How many of you remember the Milgram shock experiments by Stanley Milgram? I think we need to have another talk on that sometime in the near future. 65% of ordinary Americans will kill someone on command because the person telling them to do it is wearing a white lab coat. They'll cry, they'll shake, they'll beg to be not made to do it. They'll say, please, please don't make me do this, he's hurting. But they'll push the damn button. Because humans have a bug in the system that causes us to obey authority. Now, humans who were raised by authoritarian parents, harsh, abusive parents, they're much more likely to have that bug. Humans who are raised by authoritative, firm but loving parents are much less likely to have that bug. It's not a bug that everyone has to the same degree, but it's a bug that humans have. So when someone says to you, do this, and they're wearing any kind of uniform, it's a really good idea to stop and think, would I do this if they were wearing a t-shirt and jeans? When the cop says, hey, put that cell phone down and stop filming this, would I put that cell phone down if it were some guy with a swastika tattoo on his neck? Or just some average woman in a t-shirt and jeans? Would I put the cell phone down? Hell no. So why would I put it down for the guy in the nice shiny blue uniform? Be aware of your bugs, and you have the opportunity to figure ways around them. I had an interesting experience a couple months ago. I was walking along the street, and I heard someone make a really misogynistic comment. And I was so busy going, what the hell, in my head, that I didn't say anything. Okay? Analysis paralysis. I was unhappy about that. I didn't like the fact that I have a bug in my software that makes me panic and flip out and freeze and think in my head, oh my God, what do I say now? When someone is being misogynistic. So I wrote myself some software in my head. I said, the next time I hear someone saying something misogynistic, I will say, what the heck did you just say? Fast forward a couple of months, I'm walking down the street. I hear these 3 guys making horribly sexist comments about objectifying women and talking about them as sexual objects. And I try to go, what the hell did you just say? And they go, oh, yeah, whatever. But they stopped. They got some social disapproval instead of social approval for making misogynistic comments. And I had a workaround for my brain's natural tendency to freeze up in a crisis. It's why people practice fire drills. It's why people practice CPR. It's why people practice the Heimlich maneuver. Because in a crisis, you don't have all of your high brain functioning. You have reflex and instinct. And a lot of times your reflex and instinct are wrong. So you practice. You work around that particular bug in our hardware that literally takes blood flow away from higher cortical functions and redirects it to things like panicking and screaming and running and punching, right? If you notice you have a place where that particular bug is causing you to not act in ways you want to act, practice some habits. Practice walking up to a confrontation and saying, "Hey guys, can I help?" This one may work better if you're 6'8". But you know what? It doesn't hurt. Practice, if you see the cops arresting someone, practice pulling out your cell phone and putting a video on. 99% of the time, there is nothing bad going on when the cops are arresting someone. Literally. 99% of the time, the cops are doing their tough job and they're doing it well. 1% of the time, they're acting like racist dirtbags. Or 1% of the time, they've just decided to pick on this person because they don't like the shirt they're wearing or the color of their hair. Well, videotaping the 99% of the time does absolutely no harm at all. Does some good, actually. It makes the cops aware that, hey, people are listening, people are watching. 1% of the time? Well, 1% of the time you get a video of the cop beating up a homeless person for being homeless. And you put it up on YouTube and 1 million people see it. And they vote a little differently next election. So notice, this is, by the way, is one reason why it's really useful to retrospect on your own behavior, especially after a crisis. Stop. Ask yourself, do I like how that went? Can I handle that better next time? With calm reflection, when I'm not full of adrenaline, what do I wish I'd done? And then practice doing that. Because you can't actually trust your own brain, especially in a crisis, especially under the influence of strong emotion. Heck, practice saying, "I think you're really hot, and now I'm going to stop and put a condom on." In fact, practice saying, "Wow, this is really exciting, but I don't have any condoms, so I'm going to go to the store and buy some before we continue." Why practice saying that? Because we have a bug in our software that says when you're turned on, don't think clearly about what's safe and what isn't. Remember, 75% of aroused people will lie in order to get sex, but only 25% of non-aroused people will lie in order to get sex. So practice the opposite of the bug. Practice saying, "Hello, officer, can I help with anything?" While you pull your cell phone out. Practice saying, "You know, that's just what Susan was saying 5 minutes ago." When a man in a meeting just repeats word for word what a woman just said, and everyone goes, "Oh, what a great idea," which happens all the time. This is not some left-wing conspiracy theory. This is empirical science. Okay? All the time, women say something, and everyone goes, "Uh-huh." Man repeats it, goes, "Oh, great idea." Practice saying, I'm talking to the men in the room here, because with great privilege comes great responsibility, right? Practice saying, "Yeah, that's exactly what Susan was just saying. Good idea, Susan." It really changes the room when you do that. It really changes not just how people think about that particular idea, but how likely they are to try to pull that crap next time. Right? Shoot, for that matter, practice saying, "Hey guys, I think Susan had a really great idea there." Restate Susan's idea in the same words. "Thanks, Susan." You know? Bookend it with Susan was saying, "Thanks, Susan." Why? Because people have a natural inclination to keep believing what they already believe, to reinforce their biases. And the people who would rather the good ideas in the meeting come from a man are going to remember it as, Mickey said this great thing. It's a bug in their software. Compensate for the bug. Actually, I really liked Susan's idea. Restate. Thanks for that great idea, Susan. It makes it harder for them to edit their memories to have that be Mickey's idea. Know your bugs so you can compensate for your bugs. Because our minds are not our allies. They are not our servants. They are our genes' allies and our genes' servants. Right? Basic evolutionary theory. Your mind does not care about you or itself at all. It cares about your genes going on to the next generation. This is why we have altruism. My brother has, on average, 50% of my genes. My nieces and nephews have 25% of my genes. If I can die and save 6 of my nieces and nephews, I have improved my genetic survival. For that matter, everyone in this room has 99.9% of the same genes I do, right? It's really adaptive to run into a burning building and rescue people. That's why people do it. But that doesn't mean that your brain is designed to help you with your consciously chosen, rational and ethical goals. It's not. Your brain is the only tool you have for forming and accomplishing those goals, but that does not mean it's particularly well suited to them. We have dangerous minds. And we need to be conscious, cautious consumers of the powers and abilities of those minds if we want to act as rational, compassionate, empathic, loving people. Thanks, everyone.